Hey everyone, Will Metz here, or Guillaume Metz. It's my name in French. Welcome to this new video. And this video is going to be about what I call the 7 fields of guitar mastery. Now, what do I mean by the 7 fields of guitar mastery? They are the elements in which the mastery or the art of playing the guitar can be decomposed. Now, if you look at any art, skill, science, or discipline that you're trying to work on, you realize that usually they can all be broken down into subcategories. If I take the example of fitness, for instance, what does it mean to be fit? Fitness can be decomposed into strength. There's cardio, there is your nutrition, there is flexibility. And in general, when we refer to somebody as being fit in the large sense, they're usually pretty good or work on all of these subcategories, and that's what it means to be fit. Well, it's the same with the guitar. The guitar can be decomposed into what I found to be 7 different subcategories or different fields. And it's really working on these 7 different fields that will allow you, when you combine them together, to complete the picture of what it means to master the guitar. Now you might wonder why this is useful. Well, it's useful because you need this in order to really establish goals, right? The goal of becoming good at the guitar is just a little bit too broad, just like becoming fit. As soon as you decide that's something that you're interested in and that you want to do, right, you need to be able to create a framework and decompose so that you can tackle this giant task of becoming good at this instrument over here into different subcategories so that you know what it is you can or should work on. So it also avoids what usually happens, which is the overwhelm, right? There's so many things to practice. People say you need to practice your technique and this and this and this. And so when you sit down with your guitar, you don't really know what to do. And you don't really know what to do in reference to where you want to go and where you're at. Now, I have a lot of people will argue that at the end of the day, you just have to do it, right? You just have to sit down and practice. And I will say that's true. It's specifically true if you're really just beginning, like you've just bought your guitar, right? The first thing you need to do is just learn some tunes, mess around. You don't need to have a specific roadmap necessarily from the get-go. And I also agree that any practice is better than no practice. And at the end of the day, you do have to sit down and play. That's what it all comes down to. But just saying sit down and practice at some point becomes a little bit too broad or unspecific. You start asking yourself questions of what should I practice? What should I start with? What should I focus on? And again, that all depends on where you're at and what your goals are. So this video is going to be really helpful for, again, people that really are kind of stuck. They don't know what they should be doing at this point. It'll allow you to make an inventory of where you're at, because you can kind of grade yourself in these 7 fields. You know, I'm pretty good at rhythm, but not so good at technique, and I need to work on my theory, right? This is the type of reflection that you need to have at some point. And then it'll allow you to set better goals. Our guitarists all have dreams and goals that are usually in the lines of, I want to be able to jam with anybody, or I want to be able to play like this awesome guitarist. And those are great goals. But again, a little unspecific, and it doesn't really give you a lot of information as to what you need to be doing if you want to reach these goals. So this video will help you break plateaus. It'll also help you craft efficient practice routine where you're actually focusing on kind of your weaknesses, and you can maybe set aside some of the things that you keep practicing over and over and over again. And again, that's why you're staying stuck, because you're practicing the same things. You're already pretty good at those things. There's really different things that you should be focusing on if you want to get better and reach your goals. So of course, I'm going to start by describing the 7 fields of guitar mastery. And then I'll give you a little bit of a definition or some more detail for each field. And I'll also give you some types of exercises or general guidance in each of these fields if you want to get better. And finally, at the end of the video, I will give you 5 of my favorite exercises that I found really allow you to work on those 7 fields kind of at the same time. They're what I call compound exercises because they tackle kind of all these fields at once. I'll also tell you how I use these 7 fields, again, to set goals and craft my practice routines. So watch till the end because this might be an opportunity for you to get out of your rut and finally make the progress that you want, reach your goals on the guitar. Now, if you like these videos, once again, I love making these resources accessible to everyone for free in the full format. And all I ask if you want to support is that you click the little subscribe button, the little bell icon. This way you get notified when I come out with new content. I'm going to try to make a video once every week or every other week for very long videos, but try to come out with more and more content as much as I possibly can. Again, subscribe, click the bell icon. This really helps. All right, so what are these 7 fields of guitar mastery? Well, the way I remember them is by doing a body scan. So I start up here and go down again. That's just a way for me to remember them. But so the 7 fields are brain, that's music theory. Ears, ear training. Eyes, fretboard visualization or navigation. The mouth, communication. Go down again, you have your arms, that's technique. Go down again, you have rhythm, that's for the legs, rhythm, kind of for dancing. And finally, if you think of the whole thing together, that refers to stylistic. So again, I'll repeat: music theory, 2, ear training, 3, fretboard visualization or navigation, 4, communication, 5, technique, 6, rhythm, 7, stylistic. So the degree to which you master the guitar comes down to how well you So the degree to which you master the guitar in general comes down to how well you can perform in each of these categories. Now you might say again, some guitarists don't know music theory and yet they master the art of playing the guitar. Well, you could argue that again, they're unbalanced. They're highly competent in some of the fields, but they're limited in the music theory. And that does limit these players, by the way. For example, they couldn't take a gig where they have to sight read a piece of music. They couldn't take a gig where someone just throws a chord progression in front of them, right? Players that are famous, even though they don't know theory, doesn't mean that they're not limited in the general aspect of what it means to master the guitar. So if you want to be balanced across all categories and really excel on the guitar, you need to know all of these categories pretty well, even if you have some favorites, of course. All right, now let's explore these categories one by one. Music theory refers to your rational understanding of music. It answers questions such as, what is a chord? What is a scale? What is a mode? What's a major chord versus a minor chord? Etc., etc. And music theory really is a prerequisite to really, if you want to master all the other things. Maybe you can master technique pretty well, or rhythm, or things like that, but the problem is that at some point, again, you need to put words on what it is you want to do or practice if you want to set proper goals. For example, you're going to realize that you need to practice your scales. Well, what is a scale? That's a question answered by music theory. Or you might realize that you only know one scale. You only know the major scale. You need to learn the minor scale. What is the minor scale? What's the difference between the two? Those are questions answered by music theory. So you can't really get away without understanding music theory. It is a sine qua non if you really want to master the whole thing. In fact, part of the reason why guitarists are stuck is because they know less theory than what they can play. So it's impossible for them to set new goals because they don't even know those tools that they would want to be practicing. They don't even know they exist. They don't know the concepts. So if you want to make progress, you need to reverse this. You actually need to know more theory than you can play. You need to be able to see the road ahead that you want to take, because that's the only way you're going to be able to work on your goals and make progress. Now, you can divide music theory into 2 main parts. Essentially, there is a descriptive part of music theory, And that one tackles just, again, defining tools, defining all the tools we have to make music. We all use notes. These notes are placed in time in certain ways, and the way you place those notes in time is what we call rhythm. Then you have intervals, which are groups of 2 notes. And then at that point, musical tools usually break down into everything related to chords, which are basically notes played at the same time. You have chords of 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes, etc. And everything related to scales or modes, right? Melodic tools. So that's your pentatonic scale, minor major scale, harmonic minor, all the modes, etc. But again, working on this, you're just basically describing things that you might have already been playing for a while. You're just putting a name on it. And then afterwards, you have this other part of music theory, which is functional. And this is usually what we call harmony. That answers really practical and important questions such as, what do you play over a specific chord progression? Is there different modes or scales that you should probably be using over one chord versus another? How do you know which key you're in? Is this a modal part or a tonal part, right? All these questions are answered by harmony, which is a subdomain of music theory. So how do you practice music theory? Well, of course, first you need to gain the knowledge. How do you gain the knowledge? Well, one of the things you could do is get my books. I'm going to put the links in the description below. I wrote 2 books, spent a lot of time on them, Music Theory for the Self-Taught Musician, Volume 1 and 2. They specifically were written for people that struggle with theory and that don't know how to read music on staff. Complete for self-taught musicians, right? So I use common sense, a step-by-step approach. Volume 1 is for the descriptive part, Volume 2 for the functional part. Again, trust me, if you need help in theory and you need the basics, get those books down here. There's a link in the description. Now, there's no mystery after that. If you want to get good at music theory, it's mostly done with a piece of paper, right? It's not necessarily something you want to do with the guitar. In fact, sometimes it's better not to. So name some intervals, name some triads, or find the notes of some chords or scales. Write down the definitions of all the modes and all the scales and all the chords, etc., right? It's a very, of course, intellectual exercise, but it's really, really worth it. When it comes to harmony, the best exercise that you can do once you understand the rules of harmony is to analyze chord progressions. So you take a chord progression, you try to find the key, try to find your options for improvisation. You can even further along think about how you would substitute some chords or rearrange that tune, right? Those are more advanced things, but those are the real questions that you should be asking yourself once you start getting into the field of harmony. It's basically, what should I play when? All right? And there are answers to these questions. Okay, number 2 is ear training. Now, ear training refers to the ability to recognize musical tools, scales, modes, etc., by ear. At the end of the day, we're playing music, so we need to use our ears. We need to be able to know what it is we're talking about and to actually have an idea of how it sounds. Now, when it comes to ear training, there is an ear training that you should and can do without the guitar, where you're just sitting down, listening to things, whether it's trying to pick up the chords in a tune, or naming intervals, or recognizing triads, or all those exercises. That's something you should do without the instrument. Right? A good musician can recognize these things like a painter can recognize colors. We're using scales, modes, notes all the time. You should know how to recognize them. And you don't need perfect pitch for that. I want to be clear here. Relative pitch is enough, and almost everyone has relative pitch. There's only a small percentage of the population that's tone deaf that cannot even tell the difference between notes. These people usually aren't interested in playing music. That's not something they tend to gravitate towards. So I guarantee if you're watching this video, you're probably, like most people, you have relative pitch, or you can develop it, or you have perfect pitch. But even if you do have perfect pitch, you should still develop your relative pitch. Everything in ear training begins with the ability to recognize intervals by ear. Intervals are basically just distances between notes, and it's really the building block of training your relative pitch is to be able to recognize intervals, the distances between 2 notes. So start there. Try to recognize intervals melodically. Then you can do harmonic intervals where the notes are played at the same time. And once you're good with this, you can start practicing chords, triads, and add more and more notes, essentially, right? You want to go progressively in ear training. Start with intervals, chords of 3 notes, 4 notes. On the scales, you start with easy scales like major, minor, then maybe the pentatonics, and then you go into some more complicated scales. And then once you get good, you can also start recognizing chord progressions by ear. Now, if you're looking for something to help you with this, I always recommend people get the software Earmaster. It's incredible. I've been using it for a long time, and yes, I am affiliated with them. But the good news with that is that you do get a discount code over here in the description, WM. If you put those 2 initials and you click on the link below, you'll get, I think it's 20% off the subscription to Earmaster. And Earmaster is by far, I would say actually, the best software because it gives you challenges little by little, starts with intervals, the easy ones, and kind of guides you step by step through the process of recognizing these tools. Now again, you're not going to know what you're even recognizing unless you understand the theory behind these tools. So you have to know or learn your theory and probably at the same time try to recognize and do your ear training exercises with the tools that you're starting to understand in the theory part. So all this training here can be done without the guitar. But at some point you also want to train your ears with the instrument. So it's one thing to know what an interval is or what it sounds like, but your ability to reproduce intervals by ear is also crucial. Now that's going to require some fretboard navigation skills, which we'll talk about in just a second. But one of the best exercises here is to reproduce melodies by ear. So you listen to a little piece of melody and you try to reproduce it on the guitar. And you try to get it right the first time, right? It's not what most guitarists do where they're just kind of muddling through and at some point after 50 trial and errors they get the right thing. No, try to get that melody right the first time. That's what it means to really be able to play by ear, by the way. Right, number 3 is fretboard navigation. That refers to the ability to know where all those tools, scales, modes, etc. that you can now understand if you know the theory behind it, to know where these tools are on the fretboard. One thing to know what a major 7 is, it's another thing to know where the notes of that major 7 are on the fretboard. Now again, guitar is probably the only instrument that has a navigation subcategory. You'll never find a saxophone navigation practice method or saxophone visualization, okay? It's the complexity of the guitar fretboard, the way it's tuned, the overwhelming amount of notes and the way they're laid out that requires guitarists to have a roadmap and to approach this instrument in a navigational way, basically, right? You're trying to not get lost, just like if you were lost in the forest somewhere and you have to find your way back. You have to use tools to know where things are, and as you're moving across the fretboard, always know how to find your way back to the chords or the scales that you need to be using. Now that takes a lifetime for guitarists, and in fact I was watching this awesome video of BREAK PLATEAUS, which by the way, one of my favorite online instructors out there when it comes to guitar and theory. He's absolutely brilliant. And I mean, the guy's an expert, absolute expert. And even he, on this video, was doing a demonstration on arpeggios. And at some point, because it was a live video, he's going through the shapes, and at some point, just for a fraction of a second, he goes, right? So he's hesitating. He got lost for a tiny little bit of time. And again, that's not to talk down BREAK PLATEAUS. He's amazing, right? That's actually to show that even the most amazing guitarists can sometimes get lost on the fretboard. How do you get better at fretboard navigation? Well, same thing. You can do it with or without the guitar. And actually, I really do recommend to do part of your fretboard navigation exercises without the guitar. Because the problem is that most guitarists, when they have the guitar, are just noodling, playing sequences. They're not actually trying to visualize their fretboard and find their way. They get locked into sequences, right? That would be the equivalent of you're in a forest and you're trying to find your way, and your eyes are literally closed. You have like a bandana over here and you don't see anything, but you're just so used to your sequences of steps that you could somewhat kind of navigate your environment, but you don't know what's around you. You have no clue what's going on. You're actually totally in the dark, and it takes just one side step or one just little mistake and you're completely lost and you have to start over again. That's what guitarists experience all the time. I see it every single day with my students, okay? They're not looking. They're doing sequences, and then at some point they get carried away, they move up, and they're like, uh-oh, I'm lost. And they don't have any landmarks around this area. They have to go back to square one. You don't want to be there. So you want to be able to visualize your fretboard. And one of the great ways to do this is to put the guitar down, take a blank fretboard diagram, and write down your shapes. Right? Spend time really wondering what things look like on your fretboard. How and where are things displayed on this thing over here? All right. So what I would start with are interval shapes, right? Knowing what a minor second looks like when you start from a note. Where do you go up or down a minor second or major second? All your different intervals, right? Know from any note how to get to the next note with any distance between those two notes, which represents or is determined by the interval between these two notes. You can work on these interval shapes at the same time that you're working on your intervals in the ear training category, where, for example, maybe you start with a note and then you have to sing a specific interval above this note or hear it like, right, that's a major third, and then I know the shape of a major third is like this, and there you go. So now you're working on your ear and you're working on your interval shapes and your fretboard visualization and navigation. Then I would also, of course, work on the cage system, your ability to find minor and major triads and pretty much anything using the cage system. Now again, I know some people kind of don't like the cage system for some reason. I don't know why. I think the cage system is incredible. It's a great mapping of the fretboard. It gives you a lot of the main landmarks that you need to play, to navigate, to move around, to improvise. So work on the cage system. There's a video that I made on it. You can check it out. So again, part of your fretboard visualization and navigation is without the guitar and the other part with the guitar, right? Make sure you know how to navigate all your chords, scales, arpeggios, etc. in any key, anywhere on the fretboard. All right, number 4, communication. Now, communication refers to reading and writing music. Now, you don't have to know how to read staff notation or write staff notation necessarily. Of course, depending on how far you want to go in music, maybe you should start practicing that. And I do think it's useful. But you can become a great player and understand everything else, music theory, etc., without having to write a black dot, ever, really. To the exception of rhythm, and we'll talk about that when we get into the rhythm section, is no puns intended. And in rhythm, I really do think that it's useful to know how to read and write it, because it actually does help you get better at rhythm and be tighter. But with everything else, what's more important than staff or writing and reading on staff is to be able to write and read basic chord charts or chord diagrams. Now that is really, really useful. Whether you going to a jam session and somebody shows up with a chord chart that they want you to read, or even you're in a band, someone comes up with a tune they wrote, being able to just kind of figure it out on the spot and read it and play it is really, really useful. And same thing, writing it. If you're leading a band, if you want to play a specific tune or you want to compose something, being able to write a professional looking chord chart is essential. The software I use for this, by the way, is, and I'm not affiliated with that one, is iReal Pro. I really recommend that. A lot of people use it for jazz, but it's really not just for jazz. You can use it for any style. It's awesome to make and write really clean chord charts. And you can actually play those chord charts. So it basically generates backing tracks at any tempo with different styles, different arrangements, all the keys that you want. So it's great if you want to like try out different chord progressions and see what they sound like, and then also if you want to improvise over them. Really recommend iReal Pro. Again, I'll put a link down there. Now, other than reading and writing music, another part of communication is simply being able to talk the language of music. You'll notice if you hang out around musicians or if you go to jam sessions that we have specific vocabulary. You'll be playing and someone will say, let's tag the ending. Well, if you don't know what tag the ending means, then you're going to be lost, okay? Those are little bits of vocabulary and semantics that you need to get comfortable with if you want to make progress or if you want to put yourself in specific musical situations that involve other musicians. Best way to practice reading and writing chord charts is really to just read and write chord charts, right? There's really no other ways. If you're really unfamiliar with the basics of writing and reading chord charts, you can find information online, but it's really pretty straightforward, right? There's a few little symbols that you need to know, and then it's just practice. When it comes to the communication part that has to do with the semantics and the lingo, the best thing to do is to hang out with other musicians, go to jam sessions, start a band. Really, those are the best things to do. All right, we're getting into technique. That is number 5. So technique refers to your ability to actually play all the things that we were just talking about. At some point in the process, you have to be able to actually physically execute all these things. Technique is very similar to a workout, to anything that's physical. It really requires just repetition, repetition. It also requires good form and good posture. A bunch of things that I already talked about in a video on technique fundamentals that I recommend that you check out. And I go through all these things, stretching, exercises, everything. But technique is a little more straightforward than all these other things. You know, once you have good form, good posture, once you have the basic scale that you're trying to learn under your fingers, it's just all about repeating it, taking a metronome, trying to play that tool with different tempos and making sure that you're clear and articulate. Now, I will say that within the realm of technique, there's kind of two different aspects. There is what I call the masculine or high testosterone side of technique, which is more kind of like a sport almost, right? And it's really like speed related. Again, speed is important because being able to play slightly faster than even what you would normally use is great when you're in stressful situation because it basically just expands your comfort zone and allows you to play pretty much whatever you want. Realize that abilities tend to decrease when you're under stress. So if something is normally very easy for you to play, it can become a little challenging if you're live or if you're playing at a jam session or in a studio or at an audition, right? Even worse. So being extra comfortable, having some cushion, an extra cushion there with speed is great because say you can play something at 160 BPM in 16th notes or super fast. If that's easy for you, the day you have to do that at 120, even if you're stressed out, it won't be a problem at all. But again, depending on the styles that you play, speed might not be your preoccupation, and that's okay, all right? The other side of technique is more elegant, all right? It's a little more, you could call this a more feminine aspect of technique, where you're actually just trying to work on your fluidity, on your tone, on really like, how do I really slide this note perfectly so that, how do I really work on this slide or transition or articulation? It's closer to dance if you want to look at a comparison with another style, right? The high testosterone thing would be more like going to the gym and working out, and the other one is more like dancing. You're looking for elegance, you're looking for tone, for refinement in your playing, but it's still super technical, all right? You look at a classical dancer, the elegance that you see requires so much work, so much technique, and actually so much strength and discipline and precision. Now, to practice technique, you need to use a metronome, okay? There is no such thing as a technique practice without a metronome because you only really make good progress technically when not only you're, improving all the things we were just talking about, but you're also able to play them versus a specific tempo or specific beat. It's also a great way to monitor your progress. This way you know, okay, I can play this at 16th notes, 80 BPM, and the next time you try to increase that number if you're focused on speed. All right, so this brings us to field number 6, which is rhythm. So rhythm refers to the ability, one, to play in time. You need to be able to master all the different time divisions, understand what time signatures are. You also need to be able to keep time, right? So that's the ability, if you're playing something by yourself, for example, to not move the tempo too much, to develop a good, what we call an inner tempo, and your ability to keep that tempo. So there's really two things here, right? There is playing with a tempo versus a metronome, for example, and being able to play tightly and in time and play all your different rhythmic units or time divisions. And then the ability to play without a metronome and still try to keep the time. Now, another aspect of rhythm, which kind of also bleeds onto the stylistic aspect, is the ability to groove or to know the different feels depending on the genres that you're playing, all right? So groove has to do with what we call micro rhythms. When we look at how humans play music, even though, for example, eighth notes divide a beat, roughly speaking, into 2 equal parts, we don't really play as metronomically as a computer would, for example. We usually tend to hit the beat a little before, a little after, sometimes a little bit of both, and it's those little micro errors, you could say, that create what we call a groove or a feel for a specific tempo, for a groove. And it's those little micro errors, you could say, that create a groove or a feel. If you go onto a software like Logic, for example, you'll see there is a little function called humanize. And humanize literally means add some errors, right? Put the notes a little bit before, a little after, to make it sound less robotic and more human. Again, you need to be able to practice rhythm without a guitar and with the guitar. I really recommend without the guitar being able to read different time divisions. So practice, you know, you can tap, you can use your clap or a pen or something, and put on a metronome, tap quarter notes, tap eighth notes, tap 16th notes, triplets, are there time divisions. You can even read some rhythms. Earmaster has a function for that, by the way. It generates rhythm, and you can actually clap that rhythm. Great exercise. You can then do that to a drum groove or a tune that you're listening to again, to feel what it's like to play a specific rhythm, but with a feel associated with it that's determined by the style or by genre that you're playing with. And then you, of course, want to apply this to the guitar. So take the guitar, play your scales with different time divisions at different tempos, and really focus on being tight. Remember, rhythm is non-negotiable. You can play a perfect solo or perfect tune with all the other parameters. If your rhythm is not on point, it will suck. One little tip out there for guitarists, I noticed that if you want to see if a guitarist actually has a good time and knows how to play versus a beat, right? Not just try to eyeball the rhythm or do it by ear, is how their foot moves. If you can play even a complicated solo or funky line and still have your foot be on each beat and not be distracted by syncopations of what you're playing, that means you're 100% confident when it comes to playing versus a beat, and you can probably also keep time pretty well. So if you're one of those guitarists that does the weird foot thing when you're playing, you need to go back and practice rhythm. Practice simpler rhythms, make sure your foot is undistracted. If not, it means that you're not comfortably sitting into the beat or into the tempo. All right, and finally, number 7, your stylistic skills. Now, stylistic skills refer to your ability to play a certain genre. We're basically all playing the same chords and scales, even though, right, jazz musicians use more 7 chords, rock musicians use different things, but really, it all comes down to little nuances of each styles, again, that will impact your feel, your groove, the tone, the way you're going to actually play the guitar, maybe even the type of guitar that you're playing, acoustic, electric. Having a stylistic knowledge, being able to adapt, to sound jazzy, to sound funky, and to know what that means is essential. Now, you're going to have some specialties, of course. But a good, well-rounded guitarist, the one that's called for every gig, the one that's called in the studio, knows a little bit, if not a lot, on every genre and knows what they sound like and how to mimic it and fit in a specific situation or musical situation. They can go to a bluegrass jam and play some bluegrass. They can go to a jazz jam and play some jazz. They understand the nuances that makes you sound in a specific genre. Now, the way you get good at this is by listening to music. You cannot mimic a music that you don't even listen to. And of course, by just building a repertoire, learning tunes, the whole tune, right? The chords, the melody, the solos and everything, really learning whole tunes in the genre that you're trying to get better at. When it comes to stylistic, it's too nuanced and refined to sometimes explain. You need to just hear it. You need to feel it. You need to really go through the process of being like, okay, how are they playing that exact lick? Like, how do I get to sound like that? When I say listening to music to develop your repertoire and your stylistic skills, I mean listen to records or Spotify or whatever it is. But one of the best ways I realized is to go watch live music, because there's something about seeing a guitarist play how they play. Again, we're mimicking creatures. We learn by imitating. Really, it's one of the things that humans are incredibly good at. It's really impressive. So when you look at a guitarist play that specific lick, you might not even realize it, but you're getting those little nuances. You're already kind of feeling what it must be like to play that lick. You're getting ideas. You're like, oh, he did this slide from here to here. And again, even subconsciously, the next time you pick up your guitar, you're going to do this, or you might do this. So there's something about quality live music that is absolutely unbeatable if you want to gain stylistic knowledge. And finally, you can also take lessons. That's one of the things that lessons, and especially in person for this, in-person lessons for stylistic absorption are amazing. For the same reasons, you get to see the guitarist or the teacher play. You get to see their fingers and how they're exactly playing those licks and sounding the way they sound within this genre. All right, well, there we go. We went through the 7 fields of guitar mastery. So essentially, a guitarist that masters the guitar needs to have some degree of mastery in all of these fields or categories. Now, what I want you to do now, if you're in a rut or if you wonder where to go from where you're at, is to make an inventory of where you think you are, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10 in each of those categories. How is your understanding of theory? How is your ear? Can you recognize tools easily, intervals, triads, scales? Do you have a good idea of what they sound like, and can you name them? Can you easily find scales, chords on the fretboard? That's fretboard navigation. Can you write or read a basic chord chart? Do you have the technique to express yourself, to play what you want to play when you need to play to reach your goals? Do you have good rhythm? Are you able to play in time, to keep time, to be tight, to have a good feel, a good groove? Do you have a good repertoire? Do you even listen to the music that you want to get good at? Are you maybe too specialized, like you only know one style and you know nothing about the other ones? Maybe it's time to listen to more music and learn different tunes that are outside of your current repertoire. So again, write down a few things for each category. Put a scale to 1 to 10. And then think about your goals. What do you want to do? You want to be as good as Steve Vai? You want to play like Steve Vai? Well, look at what Steve Vai does and think, okay, how good is Steve Vai at music theory? I'll give you the answer. He's amazing. He went to Berkeley. He's outstanding, okay? How is his ear? Incredible. I tell you that much as well, okay? Technique. We all know he's amazing at technique. He writes for orchestras, so he's amazing at writing too. Again, so he's probably a 10 out of 10 of all the things. Now, stylistically, he's very specialized, right? And if you want to become like him, study his tunes, study the guitars that he studied, like Satriani. His groove, well, here maybe there are some people that groove better than him, like Corey Wong is probably way funkier and groovy than Steve Vai. What scale does he use the most? Steve Vai is known for using a lot of modes, and mostly Mixolydian and Lydian modes. What are these modes? Learn them. Learn the theory behind them. And then practice them. And then learn to find them. And then learn to play them really fast, because that's what he does. but at least see how these goals are deconstructed. See how you can write them down. You have goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, and every day you can sit down and know exactly what to do. With this method, following this framework, you can actually get there. You can get yourself to play like Steve Vai if you have the discipline and the motivation, and you won't just kind of accidentally stumble upon that goal. You can actually make a strategy and every day work at it little by little, and you'll get there. You can get there quicker than you think. I took Steve Vai as an example. There's any example like that. You want to be able to play any jazz standard. Well, start to listen to jazz. What is jazz made? What's the theory behind jazz? The chord progressions, the scales. Again, it's all going to open up into what it is you need to be doing in each of these 7 fields. This is how I craft my practice routines. This is how you can actually craft good practice routines and never be lost or confused about what you need to do. Okay, and finally, as promised, I'm going to give you the 5 compound exercises. Those are exercises that I really recommend because, again, they work on all of those categories. They're really all-encompassing exercises. I will say they require some degree of mastery, at least a 5 or 6 out of 10 on most of those fields, okay? So you can't just pick up a guitar and start doing these exercises. Those are great for people that are a little more advanced. The first one, which is probably the easiest, and you can actually do this relatively early in the journey, is improvise over backing tracks. As soon as you start learning a few scales, put a backing track on YouTube and start jamming over it. Start trying to make music and improvise and make your own solos over a track like this. It's a great exercise. It requires great navigation skills, requires you to know rhythm, play in time, requires you to work on your technique, your tone, right? If you want to be serious about this exercise, it's great. Number 2, which I love, again, if you're a little more advanced, is take a chord chart and try to play it on the fly. Give yourself no preparation time. Chord chart, play the backing track, and try to play the chords. Like, that's to put you in the situation of a jam session where you've never played the tune before. You get a track and you have to at least play something decent. And if you can, after that, once you've played chord progression, take a little solo. All right, try to figure out which key you're in by looking at the track as you're playing the chords. And then when it's your turn to solo, try to play a solo. Number 3, jamming with other musicians or going to jam sessions. This is absolutely incredible. It's essential if you want to get past a certain level on the guitar. You'll see it's a totally different experience, right? It's like I recently took on boxing a little bit. Well, it's a different thing to hit a bag and then for your first time be in front of someone for real. That's kind of how it feels when you go to your first jam session. It's like 3, 2, 1, go, and all of a sudden it's like you forget everything you just learned. But that moment, you're putting yourself in a situation of stress. And it's good stress because your brain is actually thinking, oh God, I really need to rewire in order to be better at reading my chords, finding my scales, not playing the wrong notes. It forces you because it puts you in a situation that matters, where if you mess up, you kind of feel bad and you feel a little embarrassed. So we don't like to be embarrassed. Your brain is going to be forced to make new connections and grow. And there's nothing better than jamming with other musicians, and even better, a jam session with an audience, like not just other musicians or buddies. That's going to make you grow tremendously. And it works on all those aspects, those 7 fields. Number 4, I also love this one, learning a tune, like learn a full tune, the chords, the exact chords that the guitarist is playing in the tune, so you can buy a tab or something, and learn that tune from A to Z, but don't just learn it, analyze it. Try to think, okay, what am I playing here? And when you're learning the solo, if there's a solo, why does this arpeggio work in this situation? Oh, it's because he or she are playing over the dominant chord and they're using this scale. So try to analyze what's going on. And again, this is a great exercise. It's of course great for your technique, great for your repertoire, great for your theory, great for your ear, all sorts of things. Learn tunes, analyze them. Finally, number 5, and that's kind of the big boss exercise, transcribe a whole tune by ear and then write it down on a staff or a tab if you don't know how to write on staff, and write the chord chart, everything. That would be the equivalent of an exercise where you're listening to a tune, there is no chart out there, and you have to figure it out. So figure out the chord progression, write the chord chart, figure out the melody, write the melody on a tab, figure out the solo, transcribe it, and then analyze it. It is the most difficult exercise. It can take months to do that on a hard tune. But if you do this, you will make so much progress, right? All of these compound exercises, kind of like in video games where you go on somewhere on the map and it actually unveils like a whole area. Sorry for the nerdy example there. Completing one of those exercises, even just a few times a year, will make you make so much progress in so many fields without you even realizing it. It's really, really useful. I recommend all of them if you can. All right, everyone, that's the end of this video on the 7 fields of guitar mastery. Again, I really hope that this is gonna help you in your guitar journey. I hope that it allows you to have clarity when you practice, to set better goals and practice routines, and yeah, just have a better framework. Be less confused, less overwhelmed, and maybe even break a plateau that you've been on or in for a while. Again, if you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button, the bell icon, so that you can get new videos as soon as they come out. Try to come up with more and more content as we go. If you're interested in one-on-one mentoring, I have a few spots available. If you see the link, maybe it won't be available by the time you see the video, but if you see a book a call link down there and you want one-on-one mentoring with me for a few months and you want to, help in mastering the guitar, click the link, book a call, and we can maybe get you started. Again, thank you so much for your support. I've been getting really encouraging comments. It really warms my heart. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.